If you're considering making the move down here to Southwest Florida, there are no doubt a number of things you're excited about and probably a lot of things you're nervous about too. But either way, you have some sort of expectation about what life is going to be like down here. So today, I'm going to talk about my experience moving to Florida and how life down here is compared to the expectations that I had, what things are better, what things are worse, and what's about what I expected. Stick around because we're talking about all that and more right now. Hey everyone, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. If this is our first time meeting, my name is Marc Ammons and I'm a real estate agent down here in Southwest Florida. And on this channel, I talk all about what it's like to live, work, eat, sleep, and play right here on the Gulf Coast of Florida. If that sounds like something that you're into, go ahead and click subscribe down below so you don't miss any new videos when they get released. And if you are thinking of either buying or selling real estate down here in Southwest Florida and you'd like some help navigating our housing market, please reach out to me whichever way is best for you. Feel free to call, text, or email. You can also scan the QR code here in the corner, and that's going to give you links to all the best ways to get in touch with me so we can start looking for your new home down here in Southwest Florida. With that out of the way, let's get into today's video. So if you've ever relocated to a new city, or even if you've just visited a brand new area on vacation, you no doubt had certain expectations about what it was going to be like there. You were probably looking forward to a lot of things, and you were probably concerned about a few things too. Well, moving down here to Florida is no different. I know that before I made the move, there were a ton of things I was excited for and a few things I was concerned about as well. So today I want to take you through 5 of those things that were on my list before moving, talk about which ones lived up to or even exceeded my expectations, and which ones were even worse than I was expecting. So let's get kicked off with the first one on my list, which is probably one of the things on your mind too. Okay, so number 1 on my list today is one of those things that I really wasn't looking forward to when we made the decision to move down here, and that is the weather in the summertime. I had just heard so many people tell me that I was going to be miserable all summer long, I wasn't even going to want to go outside, and that was obviously pretty concerning. But my wife and I decided that even if that was true, all the other things that we were excited about would still outweigh that negative, so we decided to make the move anyway, and we had prepared ourselves for this oppressive heat that we had heard so much about. So after we made it through our first full summer down here, was it better or worse than what we expected? Way better. We actually found that we were able to enjoy the weather in the summer down here even more than we had back in Virginia, which is where we relocated from, and also more than a lot of the other areas that we had lived across the country. And if you're interested in seeing a full video that I did specifically about the weather down here in Southwest Florida, I'll leave a link at the top of the video here as well as down in the description box below. But big picture, we learned 5 main things about the weather down here in the summer. Number 1, it very rarely gets as hot down here in the middle of the summer as it does in a lot of other places of the country. Now it does stay consistently hot from mid to late May through October with a lot of days between 90 and 93 degrees, but that's just about as hot as it gets. We really don't get those stretches of week-long 95 to 100 plus degree days that a lot of people experience in other parts of the country. And number 2, the temperature and humidity is definitely higher here in the morning and at night than many other areas of the country, but the midday humidity to me feels about the same and frequently better. So basically between the hours of 8 p.m. and 10 a.m., it's definitely hotter and more humid down here than a lot of other places. But even then, we're talking lows in the mid to upper 70s, which is still pretty comfortable. But you aren't going to have too many days in the summer where it drops below 75 even at night. Where a lot of other places may be 100 plus degrees during the day in the summer, a lot of those places are still going to get down to the low 70s or even the 60s at night with a noticeable drop in humidity. And a lot of this just has to do with the vast amount of water that surrounds us. As it takes water significantly longer to both heat up and cool down, the vast amount of water that we have tends to keep the temperature somewhat higher even after the sun sets. Number 3, because of all the water that surrounds us, we get to enjoy the benefits of naturally occurring land and sea breezes, which means that there is almost always a constant breeze that keeps it feeling much cooler than what the thermometer actually reads, particularly if you're in the shade. Number 4, it is going to rain pretty intensely for pretty short periods of time in the afternoon during a lot of the summer days. And again, that's a secondary side effect of all the water that surrounds us and the land and sea breezes that help to keep us cool. These usually occur between 2 and 5, and sometimes as late as 7, but they generally don't last very long and only impact a fairly small area. And lastly, number 5, which is that the weather is surprisingly consistent throughout the summer. So you generally know exactly what to expect most days without even looking at the weather. Outside of checking the weather for things like boating, where you're looking at winds and tides and the exact location of any potential radar activity, there really isn't much point in checking the weather throughout most of the summer because it's probably going to be pretty similar to what it was today, and that's going to happen day after day. Outside of the occasional large storm that comes our way, our meteorologists down here have a pretty easy job. Okay, so number 2 on our list is one of the things that I was really looking forward to because you hear so many people talking about it, and that is the wintertime weather that we get down here. I mean, this is literally the reason that thousands upon thousands of people either visit or move down here every year. So how did the reality of it compare to my expectations? It was about what I expected and probably a little bit nicer. So I had lived in Florida previously about 14 years ago, but I lived much farther north in the western part of the Panhandle, just outside of Pensacola, in a great little beach town called Perdido Key. And I really enjoyed living there. It's got some of the prettiest, most pristine white sand beaches that you'll find just about anywhere. But the big drawback for me was how cold it still got in the wintertime. Now when I say cold, I'm talking Florida cold, okay, which is basically anything below 70 degrees. And I know that 64 degrees is not objectively cold, but when you've been in a warmer climate for long enough, it does start to feel pretty cold. The stories you hear about how you acclimate to the warmer weather are absolutely true, the same way that people in cold climates acclimate to them. You know, if you've lived somewhere like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you're finally coming out of the winter, the first day it hits 55 degrees, you're probably going to be in shorts and flip-flops because it's going to feel really warm compared to what it had been. On the other hand, if you're down here in Southwest Florida and it hits 55 degrees, no exaggeration, you are going to literally see people wearing parkas. And with the research that I had done prior to moving down here, I knew that on average, the southwest portion of Florida was going to be about 10 degrees warmer than the northern part that I lived previously, but I was still concerned that it was going to be a little bit colder than I really wanted. However, after being down here for a full winter, I really didn't find that to be the case. With the exception of probably 10 to 12 days all winter, you're going to find it perfectly comfortable to go outside and do just about any activity that you want to. But the thing that did surprise me in the winter down here, that was definitely more extreme than I had expected, is just how dry it is down here in the winter months. Once we get into October, most of those afternoon thunderstorms have started to stop, and by November, it's pretty rare to get a rain shower for most of the rest of the winter. We actually get about the same amount of rain in August each year as we do November, December, January, and February combined. Now the biggest benefit of that is our humidity levels are really, really low, which is nice. But the biggest downside comes to our vegetation and particularly grass. And while this area is about as green and lush as any place out there in the middle of the summer, a lot of the grass and some of the plants do tend to turn brown over the winter time, particularly if they're not getting watered. You're also going to find that if you have a pool, especially one that has a heater on it, you're going to be adding a lot more water to that pool over the winter months than you will in the summer. Most likely you aren't going to add any water to the pool in the summertime as the rain's going to help to keep it full. And the water also just doesn't evaporate as quickly. But in the wintertime, you're definitely going to find yourself adding water to the pool every so often just to keep the water at the right level. However, if you do keep a cover on that pool when you aren't using it, it not only helps keep more of the heat in the pool, but it will reduce the amount of evaporation as well. But outside of that, there really aren't a lot of negatives to talk about when it comes to winter down here. Just remember that if you are looking at the Gulf Coast of Florida for relocation and you're wanting that true Florida winter weather that kind of stays warm all year, you are going to want to be looking probably south of Tampa and realistically probably south of Sarasota to get that. It just stays colder farther up north. But even with my already high expectations, I've absolutely loved the winter weather down here. And if you decide to make the move down here to Southwest Florida, I'm confident you will as well. All right, so number 3 on the list is another thing that I've heard a lot about that frankly I was kind of nervous about, and that is how busy things get with all the tourists and the seasonal residents, aka snowbirds, that we have down here. And you hear a lot of stories about how bad the traffic gets and how crowded all the restaurants and beaches get, and just how much overall congestion there is down here when we're in season, which again is really October through April. So is it better or worse than what I expected? Well, in my specific case, I think it's much better than I was expecting, but my perception is through the lens of someone who lives and spends the majority of my time in Cape Coral, Florida, which is generally less congested than a lot of the other large cities in Florida, even though we are the 8th largest city in the state by population. Cape Coral is mostly a large residential subdivision that's comprised primarily of single-family homes and has very few hotels and high-rise type buildings that can add a lot to the population density. So it's really only possible for it to get but so crowded down here at any given time. But my family and I do spend a lot of time traveling around to other parts of the state, and I can tell you that in some of the very touristy parts of the state, like Orlando, Miami, Tampa, St. Augustine, and places like that, it can get pretty locked up and congested depending on the time of year. So if you're a full-time resident living in one of those areas, then yes, you're probably going to be much more heavily impacted by seasonal residents and tourists in season. But as a whole, where I happen to live, it really isn't that bad. So for instance, if it's a beautiful, warm, sunny day down here in the middle of the winter, which is most days, and you want to go out to a restaurant, particularly one of the many outdoor restaurants we have, you're likely going to be waiting anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes to get seated. And that's likely going to be the case on a weekday just as easily on a weekend. The weekends are going to be busier. But if you go to that same restaurant out of season, so late April through early October, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have to wait for a table at all, really no matter what day or time you go. The same thing goes for places like the beach. If you want to go to the beach on most days in season, it's going to be substantially harder to find a parking spot close to the beach as opposed to when we're out of season and there's a lot more empty spots to choose from. And when it comes to traffic, I do notice a difference in and out of season where I'm at, but it isn't overly dramatic. My wife works across the bridge in Fort Myers, and her typical commute's about 30 minutes when we're out of season, and that may increase by about 5 or 10 minutes when we're in season, just depending on the particular day. But it isn't this overly dramatic change that we were expecting before we moved here. So again, where we live, the overall impact of tourists and seasonal residents isn't huge on your daily life, but depending on where you choose to move in the state, your mileage may vary and you may see a substantial change from one season to the next. All right, so number 4 on the list is something that I was both excited about and kind of nervous about, and that is having a pool. And although I've had hot tubs at previous homes I've lived in, I've never had a full in-ground pool that I had to deal with. And while I was excited about it, I was also kind of concerned that the maintenance and cleaning would become a hassle and a burden. And I was also concerned that after a while, we just wouldn't use it that much anymore. So how does the reality of having a pool compare with my expectations? Well, again, it's actually been much better than I anticipated. And a big reason for that is I made the decision early on to go ahead and hire out the maintenance and cleaning of the pool to one of the many pool companies down here who do that. Because we have so many homes with pools down here in the area, there are countless companies competing for that business to take care of those pools, so the prices are extremely competitive. I think we pay around $85 a month to have someone come out every single week and take care of the cleaning and the chemicals of the pool. And honestly, I haven't had to do a single thing with the pool since we've lived here other than just adding water every once in a while over the winter. And for me, that's $85 well spent, since one, it frees up my time to do more productive things like sit here and make videos for you guys, but it also means that the only interaction I have with the pool is positive when we're out there enjoying it. Now, I also know a lot of people who have the time to do their own pool maintenance and cleaning, and most of them will tell you it really only takes 5 to 15 minutes a week to keep the pool in pretty good shape. So that's another option if you don't want to hire a pool company to take care of it for you. And one of the other concerns I had was that the novelty of having a pool in the backyard would wear off pretty quickly and we just wouldn't use it that much after a while. And again, this is where the reality has far exceeded our expectations. We actually use the pool way more than I ever thought we would, particularly as our kids start to get a little bit older and are becoming stronger swimmers. They seem to enjoy using the pool more now than they did before. And we're typically in the pool between 3 and 5 days a week for most of the year. Now, speaking of kids, the last concern we had about having a pool was obviously safety related. And as at the time we moved down here, none of our kids were competent swimmers. Our twins were about 1.5 years old and our oldest was about 3.5. And none of them really had the opportunity to learn how to swim yet. Now down here in Florida, you have to have one of 2 different safety measures in place if you do have a pool. You either have to have alarms on all the doors that lead out to the pool area that will go off when those doors are opened, or you have to have a child-safe pool fence that goes around the entire perimeter of the pool. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you have young kids and you have a pool, you should invest in one of these pool fences for the additional peace of mind. And while it's not a replacement for keeping a watchful eye on your kids at all times, it can buy you that 2 to 3 minutes when you're out on the lanai, you've got your back turned and you're dealing with something else, you know you have that extra safety measure in place. But as I said, the actual reality of having a pool has overall been much more enjoyable than I had expected. And if that's an amenity that you're looking for in a new home, I'm hopeful you enjoy it as much as we do. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our list for this video, and as you've probably noticed so far, all the other items I've talked about until now have ended up being better in reality than what I had expected. However, that's going to change here for number 5, as it's one of the things that I sort of thought was going to be bad, but has ended up being even worse than what I thought, and that is drivers. You hear a lot of stories about Florida and how bad the drivers are here, and although I think most of the negative stereotypes you hear about Florida are either completely wrong, or at the very least are quite exaggerated, when it comes to the drivers down here, most of what you've heard is probably accurate. And the 4 biggest things I see on the road all the time are these. Number 1, people have no idea what lane they're supposed to be in, and then they try to cross through 4 lanes of traffic in the middle of an intersection and just hope everyone gets out of the way. And I think a lot of this is due to the tourists in the area who truly don't know where they're going and don't spend enough time planning out their trip before they leave. So if you're new to the area and you're going on a trip, spend 2 minutes in the car before you start driving. Review the route your GPS is trying to take you so that you're not surprised when you get there. And then number 2 is running red lights. And this unfortunately is something that I see happening all the time. The particular city that I live in, Cape Coral, has pretty long light cycles, meaning they let a lot of cars through the light before it changes, which is nice, but it also means if you do get stuck at a red light, you're gonna be there for a while. And because of this, a lot of people just try to avoid getting stuck at red lights by running them way past the time they should be going through the intersection. And this is probably one of the biggest causes of accidents that we have down here. So my recommendation is this: if you're the first car in line at a red light when it turns green, just give it a second before you go speeding off. Check the rest of the intersection for oncoming cars, because there's a good chance that someone may still be coming through that intersection even though you have a green light. If the person behind you honks, wave politely, don't let it bother you, because it's better than being dead. And the number 3 thing I see down here all the time is people driving in the left lane way too slow and not actually passing anyone. And that's actually against the law down here in Florida, but it doesn't stop too many people from doing it. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm going over the speed limit in the left lane, so it shouldn't matter. I will tell you this: unless you are actively passing another car, you should not be in the left lane down here, because no matter how fast you're driving, there is going to be someone behind you that wants to go faster, and if you're in their way, they're going to try to get you out of their way. And this is especially true on the interstate. If you've ever driven on I-75 down here in Florida, and you've been in the left lane doing 90 miles an hour and a 70 mile an hour speed limit, not that I do that, but if you have, you know there's 10 cars behind you trying to push you out of the way, because that is simply not fast enough for them. So just get over and let them by. And that brings us to the 4th thing that I see on the roads down here all the time, and that is aggressive drivers. But 9 out of 10 times, the aggressive driving that you see is in response to someone in the left lane driving slower than they should be and not getting over when they can. So please do yourself and everyone else on the road a favor and do not drive in the left lane down here unless you are actively passing someone. End of rant. But seriously, be safe out on the roads here. Pay attention to other drivers around you, because most likely they aren't paying attention to you. But I will say, if bad drivers are the worst thing you have to deal with down here on a daily basis, it's not that bad. So I hope this video didn't scare too many people away, but I think it's important to know what you're getting into before you move. And I'm hopeful that this list gave you a little bit more insight into what it's actually like living down here. But as with everything, your mileage may vary, and your experience and your perception may be very different from mine. So please do your own research and make up your own mind about what's best for you and your family before you decide to make the move down here to Florida. If you got some value out of this video, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit the like button down below, and also consider subscribing if you haven't already. And now that you know a little bit more about what life is like down here in Southwest Florida, if it sounds like something that you could enjoy in your life and you'd like to explore making the move down here to the area, please reach out to me so we can have a conversation about your needs and your goals and see if this may be the right spot for you. Feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email. You can also scan the QR code here in the corner, which will give you links to all the best ways to get in touch with me. And if you are considering moving here and there's some specific things that you're either excited about or concerned about, and you want to know my experience with those particular items, leave me a comment down below with what those things are, and I'll be happy to include them in a future video. I appreciate you sticking with me till the end, and as always, thanks for tuning in. Be well, and I'll see you on the next one.